righty.
Hi, good evening. Welcome, everyone, both online and here on in the Shorewood Library. I'm Charlie DeSando. I'm with the Shorewood Human Relations Commission. I'm the chair of our education subcommittee. I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for joining our quarterly event, which is Shorewood Speaks. Today, which is the HRC, we are hosting a nonpartisan educational session on the status of Wisconsin's current election laws. Our speakers will discuss lessons learned from the spring election and plans for upcoming elections in August and November. To my left, I have Shorewood Village Clerk Toya Harrell. And to my right is Claire Woodall-Vaugh, who's the Executive Director for the Milwaukee Election Commission. They are our speakers this evening. They'll present the latest news and information on elections statewide and within their respective jurisdictions. They'll be here to answer any questions, both online and here in the building. And hopefully we'll provide information that could help some of us navigate the voting process so you can be sure that your vote counts. This is a nonpartisan, apolitical event meant to be informative. So please refrain from making political or partisan statements or asking obviously politically motivated questions. So before I start, I'd like to acknowledge members of our education subcommittee, all of whom are volunteers. They give their time to help raise awareness of important issues that affect us as citizens. So back in the back, I have Natraj Shankar, who's a long-serving volunteer within the HRC and is one of our key members. And Florence, he's also a past president of the Shorewood Men's Club. And Florence Steinberger, who's called up the village one day and said, I'd like to volunteer. And we gladly grabbed her up on the education subcommittee. And Sadna Linville, some of you may know as the president of the Shorewood Foundation, is one of our committee members, and she is online because she's coming from a business meeting. And oh, she is online. Hi, Sadna. And we welcome her. She's a great member of our team, and she has deep ties in the community, and we're very glad that she's here. Also, I'd like to acknowledge Sharona Parker, who's the chair of the HRC and a great supporter of education, and our staff liaison, which is Captain Fernando Santiago of the Shorewood Police Department. And of course, Rebecca Ewald, our village manager. So in way of introduction, again, I'm going to introduce Toya, who's the home team person here in Shorewood. She gets to go first, and then Claire will go, and then give their introductions. And once they finish, we'll go ahead with any questions you may have.
Well, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Toya Harrell, and I am the village clerk here in the lovely village of Shorewood. I've been here a little over 7 months. I'm very excited to learn as much as I can about the election process. And I'm even more excited that I'll be moving closer to Shorewood in 42 days. I've been counting down. So I'm very excited that way I could get better acclimated and more involved in the community.
Oh, okay. We're just giving our, sorry. I am Claire Woodall-Vaugh with the City of Milwaukee Election Commission. I have been with the commission for 9.5 years. Before I was executive director, I worked in voter registration and voter services. So giving more education about the electoral process is a real passion of mine. Charlie, you want us just to kind of give overviews? Okay. So I think the most pressing piece of information or change from 2020, as many people became aware in the April election, was there was a court ruling that is currently, we're waiting for a state Supreme Court decision around the use of drop boxes and return of absentee ballots. So we are expecting that decision hopefully still this month. But we, at this point in time, in the city of Milwaukee, and I think most places, are not able to have our unstaffed secure drop boxes open. So one thing that the city of Milwaukee did in reaction to this court ruling, a lot of our voters have disabilities. They find it kind of more difficult to get out of their car, find parking, and come inside to an early voting location. So on the 2 Saturdays before the spring election, we hosted what we call drive up drop off, where at all of our early voting sites, we had volunteers outside with a secure mobile drop box, and they would check to make sure a voter filled out their ballot correctly, or not their ballot, but their envelope. And then you never had to leave your car. So we ended up having over 2,300 absentee voters return their ballot this way. Some of the lessons that we learned was we were far more popular the Saturday before the election than 10 days before the election. So when we look forward with the uncertainty of what the state Supreme Court will rule, we are planning on still, hopefully, depending on, again, on the ruling, having these staffed drive up, drop off locations, but in probably about 5 days before the election. And that's where I think it's very important for everyone to know that the absentee application deadline in Wisconsin does not jive with the real timeline of when you have to return your ballot. You have until the Thursday before each election to apply for an absentee ballot, but we have to mail it to you. And then you have to actually return it by election day. So if you're putting it in the mail, you definitely don't have enough time if you're waiting till the last minute. In Milwaukee, our average mail times take 3 days, even within the city. So it's become a real issue for voters who are waiting until that last week to apply for an absentee ballot by mail to have a convenient place to return it up until, you know, the day before the election. And then of course on election day, both Shorewood and Milwaukee use central count, so you can always return it to central count. But other than the drop boxes, there aren't any law changes. Everything that was passed by the legislature in 2021 was vetoed by the governor, so everything else remains the same in 2022. I don't know about Toya, but we continue to have an increase in by mail voting. We had about 120,000 applications in November of 2020, but right now we are about to mail out 26,000 ballots. So while it's definitely decreased, in an election this of turnout, we would usually have about 8,000 or 9,000. So we've definitely seen the uptick remain. Voters are really finding it convenient to vote by mail. Toya, do you want to talk about maybe the most important thing if you're voting by mail is filling out your certificate envelope correctly?
Absolutely. So at the tables, there should be a little sample of what the certificate envelope looks like. And it's very important. Our envelopes are highlighted to show you where you need to sign. So right in the middle, that's where the voter will actually sign the vote or the envelope, and make sure to also date it. That's very important. The second piece is the one that is most overlooked, and that's where the witness signs. It's important that the witness not only sign, but include your address. We can't count that vote if that's not completely filled out. So there's oftentimes, I'll make a lot of calls, emails, anything I could do to try to, alert you that we need the witness to come in and complete the address. So that's very important. Also, if you are newer to the Shorewood area, you would have to be a resident in 28 days, correct? 28 days for you're eligible to vote in that municipality. So if you've moved here or are moving here after that time, let's say you're at day 26, you have to register and vote in your former municipality. And the next round, yes, Charlie, you. So you can, if you're not moving within 28 days of the election date, then you can still vote here. But if you've moved onward and have been there more than 28 days or longer, you have to register in that municipality.
So Toya, you said you were moving soon.
Yes.
Based on the timeline, my guess is that you might be moving on August 1st.
Moving on August 5th.
5th.
Yes,
So still before the election.
still before the election.
Where will
So
you vote? At your new address or your old address?
at my old one in Watertown. So I do absentee because of here. And so they will mail the ballot to my home in time. And I will mail it back completed with the witness filled out complete and send it back to Watertown, not to Milwaukee or Shorewood, but Watertown.
And then on August 10th, could you register and at your new address?
August 10th is my birthday. But I cannot because I'll only be a resident literally for 5 days.
Hope you can.
I can.
Yeah, so we also have, and it'll be sent out after today, some myths and facts.
Oh.
And I don't think I included that one on there, but you stating this reminded me that a lot of people think you have to wait until you've been at your address 28 days to register. But you don't. Instead, it's just you're certifying that you will have lived at your address for at least 28 days before the election. So you and Charlie, as soon as you move after August 9th's election date, you
Yes.
can go ahead and register and take care of it from your new address.
Milwaukee
So
County.
long as you will have lived there at least
Okay.
28 days
See,
before
I
the
just learned
election.
something. Thank
And
you.
same for our 17-year-olds who are at home
Mhm.
watching right now, who will turn 18 after August 9th, but before November 8th, they can also go ahead and
Awesome.
pre-register. They're just certifying that they will be 18 on or before November 8th.
Good to know. Thank
You
you.
like how I did that little tutorial?
That was really nice. We didn't even plan it.
Nope. I think some of the other kind of most prevalent issues in elections is a lot around election security. So the city of Milwaukee was fortunate to collaborate with the League of Women Voters of Milwaukee County. So at your desk, you have Your Ballot is Secure handout. And all of these handouts that I'm going to talk about today are available at the City of Milwaukee Election Commission. We love to spread information. So if you know of a group you're speaking to maybe and you want to hand out information, I love to get in touch. But this one in particular goes over the security of voting machines and ballots and just the way in which we administer elections in Wisconsin. Wisconsin has the most decentralized election administration in the country. Our elections are administered by over 1,800 municipal clerks. Then all of our work is checked by a county clerk. And then all of that work is then checked by the Wisconsin Election Commission. Voting systems are decided on a county by county basis. So we don't all use the same election machines, although here in Milwaukee County we do. And then before every election, and Toya can attest to this, we test every machine and
Yes.
every ballot style. We test to make sure that if we do a write-in vote, that the machine catches and accounts for a write-in vote. If you overvoted a ballot, let's say you voted for 2 candidates when you can only pick one, we test to make sure that that machine's going to reject it and alert the voter. And then we have to provide all of our test results, which have to match what our test ballots are, to the county who oversees that and makes sure that our voting machines are operating and counting the votes the way in which our test ballots were laid out. So there is a lot of checks and balances, especially here in Wisconsin. Are there any questions about election security? I know that, yes. Yes. So as our audience member mentioned, there are public tests that are also done before every election. And in fact, every aspect of counting votes and testing votes is open to the public. Election observers are integral to protecting our democracy and making sure that there are witnesses and people just keeping everyone honest and transparent. But you can check with each clerk's office on when their public test is. Here in Milwaukee County, we are consistent in that I think we have 2 different dates and times to choose from. And that's because the county, again, is checking that public test as well.
And the greatest thing about the public test that I found is that my co-chiefs attend, and it's a way for them to do a complete run through of how it will be on election day, how to start it, how to get it modemed up, how to even put the media stick there to calibrate it, and how to do end of night. We do that full run through during our public test. And again, yes, anyone from the public is welcome to attend to see how it is. And the way I do the public test is I make sure that all the ballots are the same, so that as they're feeding it in, each machine will give the same readout. So wherever you are, if it's an overvote, you'll see how the machine tells you that it's an overvote and what you need to do.
Another important election security issue is whether or not our machines could be tampered with when they're in the field. In Milwaukee County, we use a machine that's called a DS200, and it is never at any point in time ever connected to the internet. In Milwaukee, we also use high-speed tabulators that are called DS450s and 850s. They also aren't connected to the internet at any point. We program media sticks, which is done by the county on a very secure closed network. And then those get loaded onto the machines, they get tested. And then at the end of the night on a closed cellular network, so it's not a network that anyone else can, place a phone call on, they modem into the county's secure closed network. And then at central count, those machines, the high-speed tabulators, do not even have modems within them. So they don't have any type of cellular modem. Instead, we have to export onto an encrypted flash drive. And then a lucky person in 2020, it was myself, gets to then transport them to the county election commission. And then they physically transfer them over onto the computers.
In Shorewood, as we talk about secured ways of registering, we have what's called Badger Books. And Badger Books is just an electronic poll book. It's just everything that's on the poll book, but into Badger Books. And also with Badger Books, it's not connected to the internet. So you never have to worry about someone coming in, hacking your information. It's very secure. We can't even link it to the internet. If we try, the whole system crashes and nothing can happen because it's not designed to link up with the internet at all. The Badger Book is wonderful in that all of the electors' information is housed there from the media stick that we also put in there, but also the post-election task is much easier. All I have to do is feed it into the computer. It uploads all of that information. It also prints out the paper that the co-chiefs are to sign. It does everything that's in the physical poll book. Also, it's very important to know we still have the poll books there in the event that something will happen where we cannot use the Badger Books, but elections must still go on. But I do want to make emphasis because a lot of people ask questions about that electronic poll book system.
And Toya and I were just talking before, and if you're watching and you are in the city of Milwaukee, or I know Charlie is moving to the city of Milwaukee, we are very sad because we will never have Badger Books because we have 180 polling places, and that secure data can't be transferred onto the Badger Books until the Monday before the election. So we were stuck in old-fashioned pen and paper in Milwaukee because they're not connected to the internet or any type of cellular modem. And we just don't have a way to get 180 flash drives out to all 180 sites. So I think Wisconsin does a very good job when it comes to election security.
Yes.
You also have before you some 2022 fall primary important dates. And then on the other side, it will say the general election important dates. And these are dates like the last day to register online. Wisconsin has an online voter registration system where if you have a Wisconsin state ID or driver's license, you can register to vote sitting on your phone, it's very easy at myvote.wi.gov. And if the address on your ID isn't current, you can update it online for free. It takes about another extra minute. And then you can update your address online at My Vote. But the last day to do that is always 21 days before the election. 20, 21, I'm getting, it's always the third Wednesday before the election. My math is horrible. And then the first day of early voting is consistent across the state. It's always the two Tuesdays before the election is the earliest that early voting can begin. So for the upcoming August primary, if you're making plans to go out of town, the first day of early voting in the city of Milwaukee is July 26th. Is that when you guys are starting as well?
Yes.
Yeah, and then we have started to publish a recommended deadline to request your absentee ballot since, as I mentioned, those state laws aren't actually going to ensure that you get your ballot and can return it in time. So for the upcoming election, we recommend that you request your ballot by August 1st if you're planning to vote by mail, and that way you have 8 days for us to mail you the ballot and then for you to turn around. In Milwaukee, we recommend you return it to an early voting site. You can drop it off here in the clerk's office in Shorewood. But this is just a handy guide, which we have lots more left over if you want to take any with you to give to friends or family, just so that they don't miss those important dates. Other questions, or do I have to read aloud my myths and facts handout?
Claire, just a second. So anyone online, if you want to use the chat function, we have Lizzie Jelly, who's our tech person running the Zoom meeting. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and then she'll give them to us and we'll have those answered. So is there anybody in the audience who has any questions?
So if you have a post office box in Wisconsin, you have to register to vote at your physical residential address, but you can list a mailing address as a post office box. So we can mail an absentee ballot to you. We can mail anything we were to contact you about for your voter registration, but you are required by law to register and vote from where you're actually sleeping at night is the actual statute. So did that answer your question? Okay. And he asked about a PO box. I really forgot that I should repeat the question.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Yep.
I just wondered, I don't even know if it matters, but there is a situation with the homeless. And I don't know if that's changed in terms of just voting. They can use the place that they're most likely, have often seen I don't know if we have homeless in Shorewood. I haven't lived here that long.
So for homeless voters, they can use a social service agency's address if they receive services from any type of social service agency, but they can also designate where they spend most of their time. So if it's a park bench, a street corner, under a bridge, they can designate that. What we recommend is that homeless voters wait until they are registering and voting at the same time. So whether it is during early voting or on election day, and that's because you have to receive a postcard to verify your address, and it also tells you where to go to vote. So if you haven't registered, like in our office where we've mapped out what ward you're in and we've told you where your polling place is, a lot of homeless voters won't know or won't remember where to go to vote on election day. In Milwaukee, a lot of social service agencies are really great about providing these letters as their proof of address, so that voters can designate, for instance, a certain food pantry as their address, and then they all go and vote at the same polling place because they're all using the same address of the facility that's providing services as well.
You may have mentioned this before I came in, but because we're not supposed to be able to take somebody's ballot someplace this year. So say you had a neighbor, she doesn't think her mail gets picked up, but she has to get it to a post box. So could I take it to the post box for her if she can't leave her house, but she's afraid the postman won't get it? Or you wouldn't know if it comes into the office by mail, whether I put it in the post box. That's the difficulty. Yes? But we're trying to be as honest as we can be. And is the rule true that you cannot have somebody else take your ballot for you? It has to come by mail.
Well, you cannot have someone, you can't have a third party person cannot bring in the ballot for that individual.
Is what a current court ruling in Waukesha
Right.
County says.
Right.
So if you are a city of Milwaukee voter, and every clerk has been left abandoned to
Exactly.
interpret this their
Mhm.
own way. I will be very honest about that. But in the decades previous to this past spring election, no clerk has ever interpreted the state statute. And I don't think it was the intention of the legislature that a voter with a disability who cannot leave their house, they may even be bed bound, not be able to vote, which is what that court ruling essentially said, that they can't, you can't put it in the mailbox yourself, or you can't physically return it to the clerk, then you're kind of just SOL, pardon my acronym. But it's also important to note that we haven't received a statewide ruling yet. So we're hoping that the state Supreme Court will provide clarification on whether a voter can have someone assist them. There is also federal law at play. Voters are protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act. We have a Voting Rights Act. And so while we await this information, at the city of Milwaukee, the policy is we're not asking for ID when someone's dropping off a ballot. If you're dropping off more than one, we ask if the voter asked for your assistance, because voters have a right to receive assistance, and we don't need to know why, and it extends to absentee voting, just like how you can have someone help you fill out your ballot when you're absentee voting.
And that's a really good point, because we are not allowed to ask the reason why that infringes on the ADA.
Yep.
We are not allowed to ask that. So I have gone, because Shorewood is smaller, and I'm very fortunate that Shorewood is smaller, so I can think outside of the box a lot of times. But there are times I'll come outside and go to the car and pick it up, because I don't want that person to feel as though their vote doesn't count just because they have a different ability. I don't even like saying disability. If they have a different ability, I have come out and received the envelope from the voter.
I have a question asking for a friend. Let's say this person is moving from Shorewood to the city of Milwaukee and has to present an ID, is eligible to vote in Shorewood for the August primary, but will have subsequently moved, but didn't get the the Motor Vehicle Administration to change their license. So when you go into vote, I have to show my friend has to show his license. And so what is the process, the protocol for someone who's in that limbo?
Well, Charlie, I will talk about myself. My ID shows where I lived 6 years ago, and I can still use it to vote. So your address on your photo ID does not have to be current. And that, when photo ID rolled out in 2016, I think there was a lot of confusion and not a lot of public education about this. I know lots of friends and family members who think they have to vote at the address that's on their ID. The only time we care about your address is when you're registering to vote or updating your address on your voter registration. If you want to use your driver's license or your state ID in order to prove your address when you're registering, then it needs to be current. But otherwise, you can use a We Energies bill, a lease, a bank statement, a paycheck, a direct deposit stub, anything from a government agency, your tax bill. There's a whole lot of other different documents you can use to prove your address. When you are presenting your photo ID for voting, The only thing, there's a very cute baby
I
here for people who
know.
cannot see. The only thing that they're looking for on your the only thing that we're looking for on your ID is that the photo reasonably resembles you, that the ID is not expired, or if it is expired, it expired after the last November election, and then confirming the name on the ID. So the poll worker should never be looking at your address or really commenting on it unless they're registering you to vote.
So you can tell your friend that.
Yeah.
Probably blow Marie away. I worked at Marquette, yeah, and in the Union. And that is the place that the Jesuit priests vote. And fortunately, this was the August primary because they moved across the street and did not realize that they had to register to vote. So when they came in, they don't have a lease. They don't really have a paycheck. They don't pay their utilities. There were a lot of things they did not have. Most of them did not get to vote that. In fact, I think only one had a bank statement that had the current address on it. So that just is one of those hard things that it's hard for people to realize. Like I live at the Oaks and they change apartments a lot. I say, okay, you got to re-register. You can't just assume. So it's a good thing to pass on, I think.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of people think that if you're just living within the same ward, that you don't need to re-register, which I mean, we have voters that move from the upper to the lower of a duplex or vice versa, or students who are just moving apartments within the same building. And under state law, you still have to re-register, which I think that's probably the most, when people talk about voter fraud or people voting from the wrong address, I think that there's just a lot of confusion over, does my address need to match my ID? And then people who may maintain a permanent address. In Milwaukee, we have a very high transiency rate. So you might get all your mail and your bills and everything might go to a more stable family member's home while you are staying from place to place. So there's a lot of confusion around addresses. Are there any other questions? As I ramble on.
That's okay.
Correct. So right now, we did talk about that a little bit earlier about drop boxes, but we are waiting on a state Supreme Court ruling, but there are no unstaffed 24-hour drop boxes at this point in time. We are all sitting on the edge of our seat waiting for that decision to come out.
And while that's a big problem in Milwaukee, I again am very fortunate that I'm in Shorewood and we have one drop box. So again, if it's during office hours, and I'm going to say this, and I might regret it, but I'm going to say this, if it's during office hours between 8 and 4:30, and you cannot come out of your car for whatever reason, please call the office. I'll come out and get your ballot for you, because again, your vote counts. For Shorewood, I will say I had to really think outside of the box on what to do in order to maintain the integrity of the voting system. Last April, I had the drop box taped so that you couldn't put anything in it. While that was effective, it just didn't look right to me. It looked kind of, lack of a better word, tacky. And I'm quasi classy. And so and so this time around, the drop box is not going to be there, because again, and it's no fault of the residents. It's just that a lot of times we work on habit. We just do things a habit. If you're driving and that street never had a stop sign, once they put a stop sign there, it's going to take you a while to figure out, oh, I got to stop. So it's just to kind of undo a habit just for a short time. The drop box is not going to be available between this coming Friday. And I state this Friday because we're mailing out the absentee ballots tomorrow. we could get a turnaround on Friday. So I have to be proactive and know what to do in that situation. So the Dropbox is not going to be available. It's going to be verbiage in your ballot envelopes and everything, but it's not going to be available from Friday, the 24th until August 12th. Just so you know.
Toya, if I get my ballot, is it okay if I wait until election day to vote it and put it in the mail?
Please don't. On election day, please, you have, again, Shorewood is awesome. The central count location has changed. It was at the high school, but I thought best to have it back at the Village Center because it's in a more central location and it's also has adequate parking for our voters. Whereas they were great in giving us that space. That space was amazing and the staff was amazing. I just had concerns about the parking and about our more seasoned electors having to walk a distance in order to take their ballots. So on election day, if you still have your ballot, please bring it to the Village Hall. If you accidentally go to your voting ward, they'll let you know, please bring it to the Village Hall. And I will be more than happy to receive it and take it to the central count processing unit.
That did remind me of a question. What if you accidentally vote in the wrong precinct for whatever reason? What is the process protocol to make sure that your vote counts, or isn't there some process where the voter is contacted?
Are they voting in the wrong, like when you say precinct, like are they going to the wrong?
Polling
They're
unit.
they thought they were supposed to be here, but they should have been voting, at one of the other precincts here in Shorewood.
Well, for Shorewood, I'm going to brag about Shorewood. In the Badger books, if a person comes, the electronic poll book system, if the person gives their name and address, the election worker will put it in and it'll bring up a message that tells them, oh, you're supposed to be at North Shore Presbyterian Church, or you're supposed to be in 538, just go right across the little area, the little table area, and vote in the correct place. So the Badger books actually gives that warning ahead of time for the voters.
But in Milwaukee, let's say that you went to your old polling place and registered to vote at your new address and they didn't catch that you moved across the street and now your voting ward is a whole different polling place. Your vote counts the moment that you feed your ballot into the machine. And the important thing is we can't get that back. So you only vote once on election day. And then afterwards, we catch that when we are doing our data entry and we mail you a letter if you voted at the wrong polling place, making sure that next time you go to the correct polling place and know where your name will be in the poll book.
Oh, also, the greeters have address listings. So that's also another way. They'll ask you your address and they can verify there if you're in the correct polling place. And it's a way to just, it's kind of frustrating to get right to that point where you feel like you're going to vote and then get told that you have to go someplace else. So I try to keep that as updated as possible so that you can see the addresses and then how it corresponds to the different ward or polling locations.
And most importantly, you can look up your polling place at myvote.wi.gov. You can look at your voting history and you can also view a sample. Well, I'm not going to call it a sample ballot because I think Toya has what is a sample ballot, which shows you what it's going to look like.
Right.
But it'll show you what contest will
Yeah.
be on your ballot on election day. And one thing that I didn't know when I was a student in voting was that you can actually print out that list and bring it with you. If you're horrible at names like I am, and you want to do your research ahead of time, it is a-okay to bring that listing where you've kind of filled out your sample ballot and to look at that when you're in the voting booth. My dad taught me that. Or your phone, you can always look at your phone. We just ask that you not take a picture of your ballot.
Please do not.
Well, that's where we were going with this. I want to Thank Claire for schlepping all the way here to Shorewood and Toya, who was in the building. Thank you very much. They're very informative. This is exactly what we're looking for, giving out information, helping people understand some of the nuances that because of everything that's been in the news the last couple of years, it's nice to ask questions and have people who are in the know. So if we'd like to give a round of applause to our speakers. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank everybody online. I saw President McCaig online. Ann, thanks for checking in. And anybody has any questions, I think we're going to stick around and clean up. So we'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you all very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.